This program is made possible in part by a grant from Charlotte Metcalf, dedicated to recognizing the work of the Metcalf Institute at the University of Rhode Island.
Editorial cartoonists occupy the space between writing and drawing, capturing truth and big ideas with seemingly simple illustration and an economy of words. Today's guest does it better than most. He's Adam Zyglis this week on Story in the Public Square. Hello and welcome to Story in the Public Square, where storytelling meets public affairs. I'm Jim Ludis from the Pell Center at Salve Regina University. Alongside me is my friend and co-host, G. Wayne Miller from the Providence Journal. Story in the Public Square is an effort to study, celebrate, and tell stories that matter. We do that by visiting each week with the best contemporary storytellers. Authors, scholars, filmmakers, and journalists, really anyone using or studying narrative to explain the world in which we live. This week, we're joined by Adam Zyglis, a Pulitzer Prize-winning editorial cartoonist for the Buffalo News. Adam, thank you so much for being with us.
It's a pleasure to be with you guys.
So, we are great fans of your work and we want to talk about it at some length, but take us back a little bit. You come from upstate New York, your mother was a nurse, your father was a bricklayer. What drew you to editorial cartooning?
Well, I feel like editorial cartooning was in my blood, but I didn't know it. Growing up, I had, really practical and loving parents, and Alden was just like a great place to grow up.
Alden, New York.
Alden, New York, I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah.
It's outside of Buffalo, about 40 minutes. So I grew up outside of the city of Buffalo, a blue-collar town, very strong, hardworking ethos. And, I was instilled with good Catholic principles and ideals. Always, take care of your fellow man. And so growing up, I feel like I had sort of, the mindset for it. I was drawn to art early on. So I was 5 years old. My mother would tell me I was 5. I can't remember the age, but I would develop a whole cast of characters of Madagascar monkeys before the movie Madagascar. And
you should sue them.
Yeah, I should. They got those somehow, and I don't know how they found
it. It's on the record right now, so you've got a claim.
That's not a bad point. I'm going to talk to my mom about that. So early on, I had a desire to use cartooning for narrative, and for storytelling, and I was just drawn to art. I was also told by realistic parents that art can be a great hobby, but you also have to think practically and work hard at school. So I was also very analytical as a kid. So I was drawn to math, computer science, and science in general. So growing up in high school, I started pursuing advanced math courses, and I ended up going to Canisius College for math and computer science, with not anything apparently related to cartooning. And then 5 to 6 years later, I realized that math and computer science was wonderful training to be to think like a cartoonist. Math is full.
Explain that, because that seems like
it seems counterintuitive. Yeah. And it didn't hit me until I was, I think, giving maybe a talk about it, and I realized that math is all. Think about it. Math is symbolism, and it's metaphor in a way. And computer science is problem solving using symbols, and cartooning is just full of symbols, from Statue of Liberty to the, Republican Party as an elephant, to the Democrat as a donkey. Just every message is often in a visual metaphor. So you're thinking abstractly about a complex problem, which would be in the news. And in math or computer science, you have a complex problem, and you need to break it into parts and think abstractly and think metaphorically. So it was training in a way for cartooning. I thought I would go into computer graphics at first to combine both sides of my brain, because I liked drawing so much, and I liked thinking critically and analyzing things. I thought, computer graphics, which was like a coming of the age when I was thinking about going to college, that was the best way to combine both sides of my brain. And that led me to Canisius College because the graphics program there had produced an alum who got a technical Oscar for Yoda's hair and skin, writing the software for it. And it was very cool. The chair of the department, Dr. McConnell, was really good at what he did. And I started going through the program, and it was a very interesting program. I did learn, as I developed through math and computer science, that a career in that field is often like software engineering. You become one small wheel in like a cog of a machine. You're spending maybe a ton of time developing code for, let's say, the skin or texture of a hair. And then meanwhile, I was talked into joining the school newspaper by my English and honors professors, and it was just the complete opposite.
Well, so you mentioned Canisius College. It's a great college in Buffalo. It's a liberal arts school. It is. What does that liberal arts pedigree bring to the world of editorial cartooning?
It's liberal arts. I almost didn't go to Canisius. There's a few other schools that I went for. I looked at RIT for computer engineering or software engineering or illustration in Boston. And had I done that and not done liberal arts, I would have been an expert in like one thing. The beauty of the liberal arts in general is, and it sounds cliche, it educates the whole person. And Canisius in particular is a Jesuit liberal arts school, so they have this extra layer of the Jesuit ethos of philosophy of just taking care of the less fortunate, putting empathy, putting yourself in the shoes of others, community service. So, I grew up Catholic, not super religious, but those values were like reinforced at Canisius. And as a cartoonist, you don't have a beat. Your beat is everything. Think about it. If you're a sports writer, you have to know everything about sports or hockey or football, or politics if you're a political reporter. A cartoonist on a staff newspaper is a visual columnist that has free rein to comment on any issue that is relevant to the readers or that you feel is most important to your views as a journalist and to the readership.
So what makes the cartoon a unique kind of story? We have storytellers on the show, of course, from film, from art, from everywhere. What makes the cartoon different? What is its unique power, I guess, is a way of rephrasing that same question.
I always am trying, my life goal is to figure out the best way to describe that. But I think it's a good
well,
way.
we hope we can solve it.
It's like a visual poem that is like loaded with an opinion. So it's not just a visual opinion, but it has layers to it like a poem. A good editorial cartoon has everything in the cartoon has a purpose and has a layer of meaning. So so you combine that with the fact that it's strongly visual and often can evoke some emotion with some of the artwork. It has that extra layer of effectiveness, I think. It also the last piece I think that what makes cartoons really special is it engages the reader in a way. It empowers the reader. Where a writer tells you his thoughts or her thoughts on a subject, the cartoon is like a little puzzle. And I feel like a really good cartoon makes the reader do just that much work so they feel like they're part of the process. And I've heard this from my readers that, it's that aha moment when sometimes the cartoons are designed to be like a sledgehammer or a punch in the face, but other times you want the reader to do that much more work and figure it out a little bit. So it has that investment from the reader.
So we're going to get into some of your cartoons, which we love. Recently, Joe Biden entered the race for president, and you did a cartoon. So talk to us about that cartoon.
So I'll start by describing the cartoon here. I have two donkeys that represent the party of the Democratic Party as a whole. And they're looking at this diner called the Establishment Diner. It's named Cup of Joe. The Cup of Joe Establishment Diner.
I just love it.
And it's serving up on the menu nostalgic Americana, wholesome values pie, tasty Trump skewers, Obama legacy leftovers. It's got everything you really need. So you have these two characters, and you have on top of the diner, it's this old 60s, 70s looking diner with a big giant cup of coffee with Joe Biden's face. It says since 1973 when he first entered politics. And then you have on the left the two donkeys, these characters that are going out for breakfast or dinner or food. And the man says, or the one donkey says, "What more could you ask for?" And his partner says, young, fresh, progressive, minority run. And I just wanted to, capture the real dilemma that the Democratic Party is having in the context of Biden entering the race. And I feel that they haven't resolved their issues from 2016. We're going through the same fits of the give and take, the tug and pull from the establishment section of the Democratic Party, from the young progressive. And that battle, it's healthy to have that, but where that ends up, it could hurt the party depending on which direction it goes.
So it's that one frame.
Yeah.
What were you thinking? How did this come to be? I mean, did you wake up one morning or in the middle of the night, or how do these things happen? This one in particular.
This one in particular, it's often. This one did come to me just when I was going about my day drinking coffee at home. I work home and in the office, and I think ideas, for me anyway, they come organically, and I have a routine that I stick to, and that helps. I have a sort of a ritual, I guess you would say, and drinking coffee, walking around, taking a walk. Those things sort of help the mind turn. I don't sit down and think I need to think of this idea now. So, as I was thinking that I need to come up with something on Biden, cup of joe, that phrase just popped up when I was drinking a cup of coffee, and everyone knows what a cup of joe is, and it's familiar, it's warm, it's just how Biden is very warm, sometimes too warm, it turns out. But it's got this nostalgia to it, and I wanted to I thought it was the perfect metaphor, the cup of joe, for Biden and what he represented. Yes, it's establishment, but there's a familiarity to it, and there's something about it that people really are drawn to. So I ran with it, and that's how a lot of these ideas come off of either a phrase or an image that pops into your head. And I'll typically jot them down on a piece of paper, or I'll at this point now make notes on my phone, and like one phrase to help me remember, which is kind of a trick from stand-up comedians. You put like a phrase that helps you remember that bit.
How many cartoons do you draw in a week?
Well, these days I could draw, I think, double my output, but I don't.
Don't tell your editors, but.
Yeah. Editors, cover your ears for this segment. I draw 5 a week is the general agreement. Basically one a work day. But it's not quite like how you think. I don't start the day. They're not evenly spaced. It actually, creativity ends up coming in bursts for me. And so, like, for instance, on a Tuesday, I'll get into a really good brainstorm, and I sometimes will have the best ideas that week all thought of in a span of 2 hours, but I just spend the rest of the week trying to beat them. And if I don't, I develop the artwork, and I approach the job in 3 parts, really. It's the best way to describe it. There's the message of the cartoon, the concept or the creative idea that expresses that message, and the form, or the artwork, the illustration. And really there's 3 hats you wear as a cartoonist. You're a writer, like a columnist, when you're developing the message. You're like a copywriter for an ad agency when you're brainstorming, trying to think of concepts, and you're an illustrator. So you need to toggle between those. And some days I produce 2 for that in that one day, and other days I'm spending the time researching, replying to readers, and emailing and that kind of thing.
I think we should note that you're internationally syndicated too. So this isn't simply Buffalo. Not that nothing wrong with Buffalo, great
right.
for Buffalo, but you have a very wide audience, which is a great thing. So President Trump is going to be running for re-election, and that segues quite naturally into the next cartoon we want to talk about, which has a couple of words, fake news. So tell us about that one.
Well, like I mentioned, that cartoons are like poems in a way because they have different layers. And what I like about this cartoon is it has the main point it's trying to make, which is about Trump's wealth and how he exaggerated his story. Let's put it that way.
So describe this for us, for the folks at home listening on radio.
Yeah, this is one that is. So on the left-hand side, it's one image. On the left-hand side, it has one of those cutout characters, like a cardboard man, so to speak, with a hole for the face.
Like you see at a circus or an amusement park.
Or a zoo or something, where you stick your head to get a photo in. So And then the two hands, it's this larger figure in a suit, and there's two giant bags of money. On the left hand, it says self-made and fortune on the right hand, on the other hand. And Donald Trump in this cartoon is a smaller figure using a ladder to come and peek through and stick his face in the hole. And then above the caption above there says fake, and then on the right it says news with a newsstand of the New York Times. The story of Trump got rich from tax schemes and $400+ million from his father, which was an investigation they had in 2018. And this again, the concept was born out of the term fake news and just kind of thinking about that, and originally thinking it was a commentary about his continuous attack on the news media and how whenever anything is sensitive or critical of him, or he's sensitive to something that's being reported, he just labels it as fake news. And when reality is projection in a way where so much of what his past and what he's saying is really, that's what's fake. That's, you know, and so I'm showing the irony and the hypocrisy in the situation. And I just love the visual of that shell. You know, you have the newspaper is sort of encased also in this shell, in the news box with the truth in the middle. And then you have, you know, a kind of a similar image on the left. But it's a metaphor not just for his self-made wealth, but for everything he represents in many ways. I mean, look at Trump University, look at the Trump Foundation. So much of it is a shell, and it's this brand he's creating, but the substance is not there. You know, it's all a facade.
So, you know, you live and work in upstate New York, which is a pretty red part of the state.
Yes.
Went overwhelmingly for Trump in 2016. What kind of feedback do you get on a piece like this?
Yeah, Buffalo is a very interesting city, and the region, I should say, in general, because, and I think it's great that I grew up in Alden, in the rural, very red part of the region, and I live now in the city of Buffalo. I know both sides of it intimately well, and in a lot of ways, Western New York is a microcosm for the country, because outside of the city of Buffalo and Rochester, the rural counties of Western New York are as red as you can get. Yeah. You know, I think they went so heavily for Trump, and even in the state races, it's all you know. Governor Cuomo basically has to win Erie County. You know, I mean, so everything else is surrounded by red. Yeah. But so I get tons of feedback. Most of it, you know, very critical from a lot of readers. Recently, with the rise of Donald Trump, I've been hearing, like, the other side. You know, people tend to write when they disagree with you, but I've been hearing from people that really love what I do now more, which helps. But the feedback is different. Yeah. It's not the same.
Do you get any sense, though, that there's a Trump fatigue, that people
Yes.
are just they're tired of the whole thing?
Yes, and I mean, and honestly, we all are.
Yeah.
I mean, a few weeks ago, I had a week where I told my editor I was happy because I didn't have Donald Trump's face or his name in the cartoon for a whole week.
Yeah.
And some of my critics, and I tell them this, some of my readers, they say, you know, it's this whole, you have Trump derangement syndrome. They sort of dismiss any criticism to this media obsession on Trump. What they don't realize is commentary, like editorial cartooning, is based on, we're commenting on the news, you know, environment. And Trump is sort of a black hole of news. He is all consuming, and he wants it that way. You know, he creates so much turmoil and change and unrest within, you know, the news cycle that we're forced to address it. And if I don't, then people would say, like, why didn't you comment on this issue? So you're
you know, this fatigue factor is not simply for the left or the right, it's for both. I've written about this.
Yeah.
There are people on both sides of the political aisle, as it were, who at this point it's just like, enough, fatigued. So we want to get to one of the most powerful cartoons I think I've ever seen, certainly one of the most powerful that you have done, and it shows the Statue of Liberty, and in the crown, behind the crown, are a bunch of children who are in prison. So take it from there. And there's not a word in this cartoon, too, by the way, not one word.
I mean, one of the goals as a cartoonist is to try to communicate like something very big and something very large without using words, because it's a visual medium. And I have there's so many talented cartoonists in the country, and I have favorites that I follow, and I love a lot of my colleagues' work, and some of my all-time favorite cartoons are simple, wordless, powerful images, just because I feel like they evoke emotion, and they say, just the cliche, a picture's worth 1,000 words. It kind of holds true with some of these powerful images. But this one in particular, there was a lot of emotion around this issue as well, so I feel like I just needed something strong.
The issue in particular?
Well, let me describe the cartoon. Yeah. I know that Wayne did, but I'll add a little bit to it. This was drawn after, in response to the White House's family separation policy, where they were separating kids at the border and keeping them in confinement and cages, kids in cages,
Right.
quote unquote, that you see a lot of these stories around. And I had a couple of cartoons before this on the issue, and I think when Attorney General Jeff Sessions took it a next step further and basically doubled down on this and cited the Bible because of it, I think it got a lot of journalists and cartoonists, opinion makers, pretty fired up. And I, as a father too, trying to again put myself in the shoes of these families that just come over needing help, asylum seekers, refugees, not criminals, as the president will say. To separate a child from a parent as someone with 2 small kids is one of the worst things you could do. And so I felt very personally about this, personally charged about this issue, and I thought sometimes the only way to just convey that message is to show it, and the Statue of Liberty is used so often, and I try to avoid it. But in this case, what was happening? This policy is really altering a symbol of our country. One of the largest symbols of America is that Statue of Liberty with the new Colossus. The message to the new Colossus poem. This policy is the antithesis to that new Colossus. It represents the opposite of what we stand for. So I'm like, how can I fuse these two things? And as a cartoonist, I'm always trying to juxtapose things. And it just hit me, that the grill above, in the crown of the Statue of Liberty has these. It looks like a cage in a way. So I just thought, if I had just a sea of children looking scared and frightened, so it intended to have this shocking effect.
So the detail of your cartoons, I've looked at all of these that we've talked about very carefully, and what I find looking again and again is I discover more.
Yes.
And I'm looking now at Lady Liberty and the expression on her face, and
Right.
it's not the proud, welcoming all.
Right.
She's you can't tell really concerned, maybe
Disgust.
angry.
Yeah.
It's just amazing how you get that detail into your cartoons.
Yeah. I feel like I labor sometimes too much over a lot of these things, but there will be people that will pick up on these little, my editor calls them Easter eggs, where they're just little things that the more you look, you'll maybe discover just another layer of the point the cartoonist is making. So I definitely take pride in putting every little detail toward what I'm trying to say.
Well, you do it brilliantly.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you about another cartoon that's simply titled Holding Pattern. And I'll let you describe it, but this was another one that I thought was really powerful.
So the caption or title on this cartoon says holding pattern, as you mentioned, and in this case I have 3 figures, a series of 3 figures. The first figure is a gun fanatic, on his knees, embracing his AR-15 or his semi-automatic, fully automatic weapon. The next figure, in a similar pose, is Congress holding NRA funding in a sort of sweet manner. And then the third figure is a mother of a victim of gun violence, embracing a grave that says more gun victims. And each one is holding what is dear to them. And the meaning, the double meaning of holding pattern, to me is really the only way I can describe our situation. So in this case, it almost has 3 different messages, but it has the overarching, opinion or message that we are not going anywhere if we continue this. And the last time I was on your show here, about 3 years ago, I had an emotional gun cartoon, and it was a field of graves, and Uncle Sam saying, "Someday, son, this will all be yours." And it was a field of gun.
That well.
Powerful.
And that was an emotional cartoon to draw. It was, again, after a mass shooting, and as a father of a son, that's how I felt. And since that time, this 3 years' time, there has been hundreds of mass shootings, in 300 and over 300 in 2018 alone. And there has been not one major gun reform passed. I mean, bump stocks, there's been marginal things, but we are in this holding pattern until we can shake the system.
And again, that cartoon is so illustrative of the point we were talking about earlier, that one frame, that one story, which is actually many stories told just so concisely and crisply and beautifully. We have more we could get to. Jim, do we have enough time?
We got about a minute left here, but let me ask you this question: is there anything off limits when you decide that you're going to write? You're going to do a cartoon. Is there anything that you can't touch?
I mean, I look at it as that's not my job. I'm not the editor. Two of my biggest struggles are don't self-censor yourself. I try not to self-censor. Anything that comes to me, put it down and present it to my editor. Number two is try to maintain my level of outrage with just how much all this is happening still. But it's up to my editor to say this maybe goes too far. And to their credit, they've been they grant me lots of freedom to say, as long as I can defend my opinion, I get away with saying whatever I want. Except for the image. I got to be tasteful about the image.
To your credit, the work is absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Thank you so much for being with us. He's Adam Zyglis, Pulitzer Prize-winning editorial cartoonist for the Buffalo News. That's all the time we have this week. But if you want to know more about Story in the Public Square, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter, or visit pellcenter.org, where you can always catch up on previous episodes. For G. Wayne Miller, I'm Jim Ludis, asking you to join us next time for more Story in the Public Square.
This program is made possible in part by a grant from Charlotte Metcalf, dedicated to recognizing the work of the Metcalf Institute at the University of Rhode Island.